There is word of a partial truce in our 18-year war with the Taliban. It is set to begin today.
Calls for a reduction of violence.
It's not clear what exactly a reduction in violence means.
अमेरिका के सेक्रेटरी ने 21 फरवरी सन 2020 को ये ऐलान किया कि इस महीने के आखिर में तालिबान के साथ अमन कायम किया जाएगा, क्योंकि हम चाहते हैं कि खित्ते में अमन कायम हो। इस मुआहदे का मकसद ये है कि दोनों तरफ से कोई भी तशद्दुद की कार्रवाई न हो।
It's important to say that this is a potentially momentous point in the Afghanistan war, that this is the first moment in almost 20 years of conflict involving the United States that there's a real chance that there could be a political resolution or a peaceful settlement to the war. It's important to recognize the significance of this moment, even if it doesn't pan out in a real end to the fighting, which, there's a lot of reasons to be skeptical about that.
They're dead. They're dead. As far as I'm concerned, they're dead. They thought that they had to kill people in order to put themselves in a little better negotiating position. When they did that, they killed 12 people. One happened to be a great American soldier.
पिछले साल सितंबर में अमेरिका ने इसी तरह के अमन मुआहदे का इजहार किया था।
Although the president seems to finally be attempting to bring it to an end. Joining us now, Richard Black. He's a Virginia state senator. He's a Marine. He served the U.S. Army JAG Corps. And he's a frequent critic of our U.S. Foreign policy. Good enough to join us now. What do you think of these developments regarding Afghanistan today, which I think is very important for the American people to be keeping tabs on?
I'm happy to see that we're starting to attempt to wind things down. They basically said, look, if you can go for a week without violence, that'll give us what we need, and then we'll sign another agreement. It's interesting to look. The last two guys who were killed over there weren't killed by the Taliban. They were killed by the people that were training, the Afghan soldiers. Yeah. There's been a lot of that going on for a long time. And
sometimes you just got to fold the tent and just say, let's get the heck out of here.
And they talk about, well, it's so difficult to get out and all of this. The best way to get out is to leave. You just leave.
It seems so.
You just leave.
It seems so simple, so rudimentary, but boy, we have a tough time doing that, don't we, Senator? Let's think about this for a minute. We've got Libya, we've got Syria, we've got Iraq, we've got Afghanistan, we've got a bill that we as American taxpayers are looking at of about $11 trillion. And I really, honestly, as an American who loves this country and wants to see us succeed, can't see a place in one of those wars where I can say with pride, we won that sucker.
No, not only that, but I don't think you can identify any particular thing that we have done where we can say this is a real achievement. This has really brought about a change for the better in some way.
That's sad, man. Yeah.
अमेरिका के सदर डोनाल्ड ट्रंप ने तालिबान को इस मुआहदे की पेशकश की थी, लेकिन तालिबान ने इस मुआहदे पर तहफ़्फ़ुज़ात का इजहार किया और इस मुआहदे से इनकार कर दिया।
Forces would seize all planned offensive operations across the country. The post Susanna George traveled to the Helmand province, a Taliban stronghold, during the week of reduced violence.
So this is at an outpost that's just on the edge of Marja in central Helmand. So when we arrived at the base, the soldiers there, they told us that earlier in the day, Taliban fighters, a small group, drove up to the base and they wanted to talk to the soldiers. And what one of the soldiers at the base told us is he thinks that the Taliban came over because they're curious. They want to meet the people who they've been shooting at for the last few years. As the day went on, the soldiers at this base continued yelling to the nearest Taliban base. And finally, a Taliban fighter drove up on a motorcycle, and the soldiers, quickly ran out and started making their way across this field to meet with them. They were calling out things like, come, sit with us, have lunch, we'll bring a good chicken for you. But the Taliban fighter, was yelling back that, all of these things were strictly forbidden by his commanders, even during this reduction in violence period. And he quickly kind of sped off. But the soldiers, when they returned, they were really positive. Many of them were ecstatic, actually. They said that they felt like this showed that both sides wanted peace, and that as the days of the reduction in violence continue, that they'll get closer and closer to that sit-down, in-person, formal meeting with the Taliban.
लेकिन आज 17 साल की खूनरेज लड़ाई के बाद अफगानिस्तान अमेरिका में अमन मुआहदा होने जा रहा है, जिसके बाद दोनों फरीकैन की तरफ से जंग बंदी हो जाएगी और दोनों फरीकैन किसी भी जंगी कार्रवाई से दूर रहेंगे और एक लंबे अरसे के बाद अफगानिस्तान में अमन बहाल होगा।
اعلان شو او زه ډیر خوشاله یم خدای دې دغه دایمي سوله په افغانستان کې راولي چې د خونریزي او مسلمان وزن کم شي.
دولت افغانستان خواستاری هستیم که این نشست برخاست‌ها را باز هم بیشتر بسازد تا بتونیم که بالاخره ما تمام مردمی که در کابل و در تمام مناطق افغانستان زندگی دارند در یک امنیت کامل و عاری از هر نوع دهشت و انفجار و انتحار زندگی بکنه و مسائل زندگیشون.
Since 2001, nearly 800,000 U.S. troops have been deployed to Afghanistan, some more than once. Of those, 2,300 have died. Some 20,000 more have been wounded.
One of the primary things to worry about is splits within the Taliban and factions within the Taliban not respecting a ceasefire or not respecting the terms of the agreement. There's also the problem of whether or not the Afghan parties could ever agree to something if they do get to the peace table. We don't know much about whether the Taliban has abandoned its earlier positions that are extremely problematic, including its previous refusal to let women take part in public life. And on the other hand, there's a lot of reservations among the Afghans on the other side about the potential for allowing the Taliban to impose its hardline rules again in a country that now is vastly different in 2020 than it was in the 1990s. Strong desire on the part of the Trump administration on a political level to reach this agreement, in part because we know that President Trump really wants to withdraw troops from Afghanistan, and this would hypothetically allow him to do that. There's also a strong desire on the part of the U.S. military to reach a political settlement because they, again, believe that the war is not going to be won militarily. They've tried all sorts of different strategies, they've tried different troop levels, and the war has essentially been in a stalemate for years now. What the American commander in Afghanistan, General Austin Miller, has said is that he could do the current mission, which is about counterterrorism and about advising and training Afghan forces, with a smaller force. So if there's a future government that includes some elements of the Taliban and some elements of other Afghans, that they would be able to reach a consensus about having some sort of modest continued American troop presence. That's the hope, at least, and so we would just have to see how that goes.